Recorded.
Today, I'm going to talk about looking at the ego with Jesus. And this will be the first in a three-part series. And we're going to start off by asking Jesus for help, asking him to join with us right now. Asking for help contains the recognition that we need help. We don't know what we're doing. The recognition that Jesus is real and walks with us, and the recognition that we'll be given help. So we're going to review what the ego is or seems to be, the way it operates, and what exactly we're looking at with Jesus. This series was inspired by something Ken said in a class he gave called Healing, Hearing the Melody. I don't have the exact quote, but I have the spirit of it. He was urging everyone to recognize the depth of the fear that we have and the different ways we block the truth from reaching our awareness. And this is what he said. It's not the extent to which we let the ego go that is the focus. It's the extent to which we are being aware of our ego. And that just really struck me when I heard it within the context of looking at the ego with Jesus. If we were to focus on the extent to which we let the ego go, that would be fraught with ego involvement. So who exactly would be making the evaluation about how much we've let it go? And what do degrees mean? We can't identify with the ego 50% because the thought system is total. So the degree isn't the degree of identification. The degree is the degree of awareness of what we've chosen. It's just such an important distinction. As Ken said, we can see the extent to which we're aware of our ego. We can see what's in our awareness. In awareness, we're not evaluating what we're observing. We're looking. When we talk about looking at the ego, it's an inside job. That is what is going on. We're not looking at what seems to be happening outside of us. When the Course says nothing happens outside of us, that means nothing we experience is caused by anything outside of ourselves. So there's no real benefit to focusing on what seems to happen in the world. Jesus says in the chapter Reason and Perception in the introduction, the world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. But though it is no more than that, it is not less. Therefore, to you, it is important. It is the witness to your state of mind, the outside picture of an inward condition. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with that quote. And then in chapter 12, the Holy Spirit's curriculum, section 3, the investment in reality, he says, there is no world outside of him. Later in that section, everything you perceive as the outside world is merely your attempt to maintain your ego identification. For everyone believes that identification is salvation. What an important line. Everything we perceive is only our attempt to maintain our ego identification. So I'm going to be interspersing a lot of quotes. And in that healing seminar that I just watched with the Center for A Course in Miracles, Ken said he was sharing quotes so that no one would accuse him of making it up. I thought that was so funny because I have that. I always want to share a lot of quotes too because it's so beautiful and it's like a song. But for that reason too, I'm not making anything up. The only thing I ever share is what I learned from Ken in the Course. So what are we looking at with Jesus? We're looking at our investment in insanity. And that investment is manifest in our identification with the ego. So the Course teaches that everyone who believes they are a separate self is identified with the ego thought system. As Ken said, being in our right mind is being in our wrong mind and looking at it with Jesus. So we look at what we've made of ourselves without defenses. Our face of innocence is our primary defense. That face of innocence maintains that we're victims, that we're in no way responsible for what we are or how we feel what we feel. What I am is caused by what others think, say, and do. So when we're ready to see past this defense, then we can see what we have really made of ourselves. And so I'm going to go into that in more detail a little bit later. I just want to start off with the Course descriptions of the ego, and this will be what is beneath the face of innocence. Beneath the face of innocence is the whole ego thought system. When we chose the ego at the instant of disaster, we essentially became the ego. We join with it, and so the descriptions in the course of the ego are descriptions of what we made of ourselves. When we look really honestly at that thought system and our investment in it, Jesus can show us that it isn't what we are, but it certainly is what we believe we are, and that's why it can be so hard and so painful to do. So we're going to look at some course descriptions of the ego. In chapter 31, the final vision, section 7, the Savior's vision, he says of the ego, it is a thing of madness, pain, and death, a thing of treachery and black despair, of failing dreams, and no remaining hope except to die and end the dream of fear. Pretty gruesome. So there is no pretty picture painted of the ego. And it's not to judge the ego. The purpose of the descriptions is not to judge the ego. The purpose of the course descriptions is to look beneath the surface of that idea. We're innocent victims, powerless, just subject to the whims of outrageous fortune. So we have to look beneath that surface to see the purpose that it's serving. In chapter 21, Reason and Perception, section 5, the function of reason, he says, listen to what the ego says and see what it directs you see, and it is sure that you will see yourself as tiny, vulnerable, and afraid. You will experience depression, a sense of worthlessness, and feelings of impermanence and unreality. You will believe that you are a helpless prey to forces far beyond your own control and far more powerful than you. So he also describes the voice we joined with and we listen to, which is the ego. So he describes, he gives various descriptions throughout the course, and I won't do an exhaustive list, but just some of them. The ego is childish. It is always wrong. It is insane. It is capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. It is weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful, and beset with pain. So he describes how we feel when we identify with the ego. There's no sound that does not speak of frailty within you and without. No breath you draw that does not seem to bring you nearer death. No hope you hold but will dissolve in tears. That's from lesson 191, I am the Holy Son of God himself. I think it's important to really pay attention to those passages because they're difficult. But, it's one of those things, if it's something that we want to overlook, we ask Jesus for help and we look at it, precisely because we're so resistant. So we look at those things without calling ourselves names. And, we just remind ourselves what we're looking at, we are learning isn't real. It's not the truth in us, although it seems very real. It resonates. And I think there's nobody who hasn't felt, their hopes dissolve in tears and maybe frail and powerless. So next, I want to look at how this plays out in the world. So we've kind of gone through what we're looking at with Jesus, what lies beneath the surface of what we think we are, and now how it plays out as a practical matter. We watch ourselves reacting to the world we perceive. So our reactions involve separating out the things we want to condemn and then the things we want to embrace. And that is in keeping with the ego's only evaluation. From chapter 17, Forgiveness in the Holy Relationship, section 6, Setting the Goal. So the ego's only evaluation, the only judgment it makes is whether or not the ego likes it, is it acceptable, or does it call for vengeance? And, that's kind of reminiscent of it's only capable of suspiciousness or viciousness. What we do is we watch ourselves as we react to the world, deciding what calls for vengeance. The vengeance is the condemnation offered and the grievances held. So we can become aware of these through our special relationships. Our special relationships is everything in our everything that makes up our world. It's our classroom. We have a special relationship with everything that seems to be separate. Now, of course, the most obvious special relationships are with the people in our lives. So our special relationships will seem to fail us. And probably more accurately, they seem to fail the idea we established for them. So anyone can fail us at any time, and there's no sense of safety possible. We feel compelled to defend ourselves against that uncertainty. Whether we're talking about our parents, siblings, friends, lovers, spouses, coworkers, strangers, any of them can fail us at any time. And we watch ourselves love someone one day and hate them the next. We watch the total chaos and instability. It's inside of us, but we see it play out in what seems to be outside of us. We experience conflict whenever someone or something kind of touches us, and we experience it as less than the brush of an angel's wing. That's something my husband used to say. I don't like the way you just talked to me. It felt like less than the brush of an angel's wing. The kind of care our ego demands is extraordinary. So we'll just take an example. We can just be driving to work, singing our favorite song, enjoying the ride, and we're suddenly cut off in traffic. And then we become angry. The anger means something has gone wrong, and that is the cue to ask Jesus for help, to look with us. The experience is that the other person's actions created the anger and is solely responsible for it. So now I'm upset, and it isn't my fault. Looking with Jesus, so we basically first look at, quote, what happened, and then we ask for help in seeing it differently. What happened? Someone cut me off in traffic. And my response, my belief, they caused me anger and that I am innocent and they're guilty. So I judge them, condemn them, and hold a grievance. So when we look with Jesus, we're not trying to fix it or be spiritual or have some kind of spiritual response or try to be a holy ego. We only look with Jesus. That is it. The premise is questioned, that my experience is born of what you do. So am I at the mercy of forces beyond my control? We watch the dream figure, we identify with scream and yell, and maybe seek retribution of some kind of, now I'm going to cut you off in traffic. Well, looking through Jesus's eyes, we don't judge what seems to happen. We look within at what we have accepted in ourselves as the truth. The, quote, little self we think we are seems dedicated to separation and the conflict that follows from that thought. So the purpose of judgment is to prove conflict is real, which proves the separation happened. So that entire experience of being cut off in traffic and my ego evaluation, my ego experience of the whole thing is in line with its goal and purpose to maintain the separation. Because everything is used for one of two purposes, to perpetuate the dream or to awaken from the dream. So I look at that with Jesus, my ongoing choice to perpetuate the dream. So what's beneath that surface of the face of innocence can be seen only by looking with Jesus, because that's the only way to look without judgment. Otherwise, it's the ego evaluating itself. As Jesus says in chapter 22, Salvation in the Holy Relationship, section 2, your brother's sinlessness. Behold the great projection, but look on it with the decision that it must be healed and not with fear. So we don't have to fear our own reactions, we don't have to fear our own thoughts. We look at it as a classroom. We're learning the lessons. So there's a dichotomy between looking with Jesus and recognizing we cherish what we made. So we want to look without judgment on what we made while we're cherishing it. And so the goal of looking is to move through our defenses to the truth. to a reflection of the truth, to a holy instant. So the defenses start with the face of innocence, and we look with his eyes to see beneath that and see how we preserve ourselves at the expense of others. So we need them to fail us, so we don't have to accept responsibility for the way we feel. Okay, so first we'd have to recognize we're miserable. If we deny our misery, then we're basically denying the motivation to look with him. So the other side of that, the other side of the goal of looking and looking with him, the goal to forgive, as the Course defines it, is our goal to preserve our ego at any cost. There is the split mind, the wish for separation against the wish for healing. In chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego, section 2, False Autonomy, he says, you react to your ego much as God does to his creations, with love, protection, and charity. We love that which we purport to want to transcend. A split mind is very uncomfortable. As much as we believe we want to transcend the ego, we want to practice forgiveness, we want to look with Jesus and awaken from the dream, we want to accept the atonement for ourselves, we must acknowledge that a part of us is clinging to what we want to transcend, that we cherish what we made. Jesus is very explicit about that in his Course, and it can be really hard to recognize that. We experience our own good intentions. We experience loving the Course, loving our teacher. The experience is so different from what clearly must be true. Because if what he's saying is not true, then what we're really saying is I'm not responsible for the way that I feel. So we have to acknowledge that resistance, because it is the explanation for the maintenance of the dream. So we acknowledge the split mind. And again, if we don't acknowledge it, there is no practice of forgiveness. It doesn't exist. When we're aware of the ego without judging it, just seeing it for what it is, which is the opposite of love, because love has been denied, then we are looking with him. We know we're looking with him if it's without judgment. The ego loves to look upon itself and evaluate itself. It's fascinated by itself and all of its workings. It loves to rationalize and justify attack. So it's pretty clear. I don't think we can be fooled for very long when we're listening to the voice of our ego. Doom will come in there in some way, but there'll be a lot of rationalizing and justifying attack and anger, and which is the preservation of the face of innocence, the first line of defense. We know we're looking with our ego and not Jesus by the way we feel. So that's pretty obvious. If peace is not in our awareness, we are told in the Course to ask our friend to join us and give us certainty of where we go. It's in chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego. Beautiful, beautiful line. If peace is in your awareness, ask your friend to join with you and give you certainty of where you go. And certainty can only be of him. It can never be of the ego, who walks uncertainly upon its own bed of lies. The ego will not permit us to find escape from what it wants. That's a direct Course quote. This is a Course quote. The ego will not permit us to find escape from what it wants. That is the function of the Course, which teaches us our only function is forgiveness. Beautiful. And what is forgiveness? In the workbook part 2, forgiveness is still and quietly does nothing. It offends no aspect of reality, nor seeks to twist it to appearances it likes. It merely looks and waits and judges not. And that is really, Ken's don't fix the dream. Whenever we think that we don't like something that seems to be happening, that we don't like the form of something, we want everybody to think, say, and do different things than the script is calling for. That is an attempt to fix the dream and change the pieces on the chessboard. But those pieces mean nothing. We've given them all the meaning they have. So to try to change them or to want them to look like something is elevating form over content. There is no content till we decide what it is. Does it mean nothing or does it mean everything to us? So, of course, this whole process isn't easy. That's why, we do it for decades. We spend our entire lives practicing looking with Jesus. And the the book says that the Holy Spirit says um, we will gain much from practicing the mechanics of the holy instant. Just essentially the same as practicing the mechanics of forgiveness, looking with Jesus. I'm seeing Jesus is sitting next to us. We're holding his hand and we're looking out through his eyes and not the eyes of the ego, not through the eyes of judgment, separation, the reality of the dream, the death of God. It's not easy. It's not easy precisely because of our investment in the dream and the self that we believe we are. It's not easy to look with him. We intellectually understand what the Course teaches and see it with our mind's eye, that there's nothing valuable in what we made. It's actually not even a difficult intellectual exercise to see there's no value in it. Even just going by his way of determining whether or not something has value. When you get to whether it's internal, that excludes the entire world. But even at this level, you eventually come to see all roads lead to the same place, disappointment, nothing, and nothingness. So yeah, there's nothing valuable in what we made, and still we're invested in making other people wrong about whatever it is they are thinking, doing, or saying. We want to see the guilt outside of us, and we don't want to let it go. There's the split mind again. That's why it's not easy, because of the split mind. So we watch ourselves not wanting to let it go. We don't want to let our ego go. We want to keep listening to the ego voice because we want to keep holding our grievances tight to our chest. You will pry my grievances from my cold, dead hands. That is very much in line, that idea, with what he says in the psychotherapy pamphlet. He says in that resistance is the ego's way of looking at things. It is resistance. It's so important to remember throughout all of this that it's not a sin to choose the ego. It's not a sin to get angry and upset and even attack somebody. It just won't make us happy. If we call it a sin, then we elevate it to the level of reality as though it had some actual impact on the truth. So that's what Jesus is trying to teach us, that it's not sinful. It just won't make us happy. There is no sin. Not one note in heaven's song has been missed. Choosing again is still our only hope, because what we chose will never make us happy. And however dimly, we all recognize that's true, regardless of the resistance that we feel. So Jesus is trying to spare us the madness, and he gave us a function, and that function is looking with him. In honesty, I can honestly say that I don't want to give up my grievances. I am lost in my dreams of specialness. I just say, as Ken taught me to view this, that I'm too afraid of love right now. I don't have to make a big deal out of the fact that I do not want to stop choosing my ego, that I want to hold on to my grievances, that I want to fix the dream, that I want a better dream. I can see that without calling myself bad names, without getting really angry with myself for harming myself in this way. I'm just too afraid of love right now. And it's that simple, and it's no big deal. And the ego will always want to make everything a big deal. And that's how we can tell we chose it, if we're making something a big deal. And I just say, I don't want to take your hand, Jesus. I don't want to look with you. But it's only the fear of love and not a sin. So what do? We look. We don't judge. We don't fix. We don't defend. We don't deny. Only look with Jesus. So lastly, in closing, I want to look at a definition of the ego that's found in the clarification of terms. What is the ego? Nothingness, but in a form that seems like something. I love that so much. Nothingness in a form that seems like something. Such a great line to carry with you through your day. Oh, I just got upset about something. I got upset about nothingness in a form that seemed like something. It's a great reminder when we're really caught up in self-judgment, and trying to prove that conflict's real. And in that clarification of terms, he goes on to say, the ego's opposite in every way, in origin, effect, and consequence, we call a miracle. The miracle forgives, the ego damns. Neither need be defined except by this. Beautiful. So we ask for help and practice forgiveness and allow our world to be gently lit by miracles. Thank you for listening.